The metallic clang of the mop hitting the polished marble floors of Blackwood Military Academy echoed in the vast hall, a sound as familiar to 70-year-old Arthur Jenkins as his own heartbeat. For 7 years, he had moved through these hallowed halls, a gray ghost in a janitor's uniform, unseen by the eager young cadets and barely acknowledged by the officers who strode past him daily. His weathered hands, once firm on a rifle, now gripped a cleaning cart with practiced ease. Blackwood didn't know about that other life, the one where he commanded, where his decisions saved lives. He preferred it that way. Mostly. The casual disrespect, though, still stung. "Hey, Pops, missed a spot." A sharp voice cut through the silence. Lieutenant Cole, barely half Arthur's age, pointed a gleaming boot at a speck on the already immaculate floor. Arthur simply nodded, his face impassive, and wiped the spot. He'd learned to absorb the slights, to let them roll off him like water off a duck's back point one evening. Working late in the officers' lounge, Arthur overheard a conversation. "Can you believe they're pushing for more diversity? Standards will go right out the window," scoffed Captain Thorne. Thorne, noticing Arthur, smirked and deliberately knocked his coffee cup, spilling dark liquid across the freshly polished table. "Oops," he drawled. "Guess the old man has more work to do. Thanks, boy." Arthur's hands trembled, not from fear, but from the immense effort it took to contain his dignity. His only solace at Blackwood was Daniel Miller, a bright, determined young cadet who saw Arthur, truly saw him. Daniel, an aspiring officer, often stopped to chat, confiding in Arthur about the subtle prejudice he faced. "How do you deal with it, Mr. Jenkins? Being treated like you're nothing," he once asked. Arthur paused, his cloth still. "You know who you are, son," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "No one can take that from you, unless you let them." He spoke of battles, not knowing how deeply those words resonated with his own forgotten past. The announcement came like a thunderclap. General Charles Kingston would be visiting Blackwood for a ceremony honoring veterans. Arthur froze. Kingston. The name ripped him back to the sweltering jungles of Dragon Valley, to helicopter rotors and the smell of gunpowder, to Kingston's younger face, mud-streaked, as Arthur dragged him to safety. For the first time in 7 years, Arthur called in sick. He paced his small apartment, the anxiety a live wire in his veins. Finally, he unlocked a small, perpetually sealed cabinet in his bedroom. Inside lay the remnants of another life. A crisply folded uniform bearing Lieutenant Colonel insignia, a collection of tarnished medals, and photographs of young men with weary smiles. He picked up a photo of his Special Operations Unit, the Shadow Squad, so named for their ability to vanish behind enemy lines. In the center, a younger Arthur, tall and proud, stood surrounded by mostly white soldiers who followed his command. He remembered their initial skepticism, the veiled comments, until Dragon Valley. Their helicopter shot down, communication gone, surrounded by hostiles. Arthur had led them through 40 miles of dense jungle, evading capture, gathering intelligence, and discovering a massive weapons cache intended for a surprise attack on an American battalion. Outnumbered and outgunned, Arthur devised a daring strategy that not only secured the weapons, but created a diversion, allowing the trapped battalion to retreat to safety. Hundreds of lives saved. There was talk of commendations, of medals. But the ceremony was postponed, then canceled. His paperwork disappeared. Reports altered. A white officer, not even present, received the credit. Arthur was quietly transferred to a desk job. His contributions gradually minimized. He returned the items to the cabinet, but for the first time in decades, left it unlocked. The next morning, Arthur returned to work. He overheard whispers. Kingston was extending his stay, looking for someone from his old unit. Could it be? As Arthur polished the floor outside the administrative offices, he heard Kingston's voice. "I've dedicated years to finding him," the general stated. The records were deliberately obscured. Someone wanted his contributions erased. If he's still alive, I owe it to him to set the record straight. What happened wasn't just an oversight. It was a deliberate act of racism. Arthur's heart hammered. After all these years, Kingston was still searching, still trying to right that long-ago wrong. A spark of the man he used to be, the leader who commanded respect, stirred within him. That night, he took out the medals his men had privately given him, crudely inscribed to the best damn officer in Dragon Valley. Tomorrow, he decided, he would stop running from his past. The tension at Blackwood was palpable. Arthur, pushing his cart, heard Captain Thorne snickering. That old man jumps like he's still got some sergeant barking orders at him. Probably never made it past private if he served at all. The irony was sharp. In the reception hall, preparing for a donor event, Thorne loudly ordered Arthur to clean an already spotless floor for the third time. Do it again, boy. Daniel Miller entered, jaw tight, seeing the humiliation. Sir, Daniel interjected, Mr. Jenkins has other areas requiring his attention. Thorne's face darkened. Are you questioning my assessment, cadet? Daniel held his ground. Arthur, watching, felt a change within him. He stood taller, his voice, usually quiet, now carried a natural authority. It's all right, Daniel, he said, but the steel in his tone made several people look at him. Truly look. Later, Daniel was placed on disciplinary probation. That night, Daniel visited Arthur. It's the system's fault, Daniel insisted. The same system that lets men like Thorne thrive while men like you. He looked around Arthur's bare apartment. Were you in the service, Mr. Jenkins? Arthur admitted, a lifetime ago, Dragon Valley. Daniel's words hit Arthur hard. If I quit, that's one less black officer to many of them, to change things from the inside. It was exactly what Arthur hadn't done. The next morning, Arthur positioned himself near the conference room where Kingston was meeting senior staff. He heard Kingston describe the Dragon Valley mission, Arthur's unit, the Shadow Squad, and the impossible feat of saving the 7th Battalion. That officer should have received the Distinguished Service Cross, Kingston declared, his voice hardening. Instead, his accomplishments were systematically erased. Lieutenant Colonel Arthur Jenkins. Captain Thorne interjected, skeptical. Unlikely a black officer could have led such a critical mission without proper recognition. Kingston rebutted, revealing a recovered original citation for the Distinguished Service Cross, signed and approved, then mysteriously lost. As Kingston explained the deliberate cover-up due to racism, Arthur accidentally knocked his bucket. The door swung open. Kingston's eyes met Arthur's. My God, Kingston whispered, stepping forward. Arthur Jenkins. The room fell silent. Arthur straightened, no longer the janitor, but every inch the military officer. Hello, Charles, he said quietly. It's been a long time. Kingston snapped to attention, offering a crisp, formal salute. Sir, he said, it is an honor to finally find you. The room erupted in murmurs. Thorne sputtered, This is absurd. This man is a janitor. Kingston cut him off. Commander of Special Operations Unit 7, Shadow Squad. One of the finest officers I've ever served with, and the man who saved my life along with hundreds of others during the Dragon Valley mission. Arthur stood still as the officer stared, truly seeing him for the first time. Some battles aren't worth fighting, Captain, Arthur said quietly to Thorne, or at least that's what I believed for many years. He recounted his transfer, the denied promotion, the doors that closed in civilian life, because being a black officer was a liability. He had faded into invisibility, choosing survival over constant battle. Kingston promised to correct the record. 3 days after a vandalized and ransacked apartment where his precious metals were stolen, Arthur, now in a secure guest suite, received a call from Kingston. We have special visitors, the general announced. At the appointed time, 5 elderly men entered the conference room. Arthur stared, recognition dawning. My God, he whispered. Sergeant Baker, Corporal Davies, Miller, his former Shadow Squad, men he had commanded, men he had saved. They had never forgotten him. They revealed a shocking truth. Captain Thorne's father, Colonel Thorne, was the officer responsible for bearing Arthur's commendation. Major Thorne was continuing his father's work. This revelation, combined with stolen evidence from his apartment, ignited a new resolve in Arthur. I'm done being silent, he declared a TA special hearing. Flanked by his reunited squad, Arthur presented his case. Baker, Davies, and the others gave powerful, consistent testimony. Kingston revealed original deployment records, after-action reports, and a grainy black-and-white video of a younger Arthur briefing officers. Clear, irrefutable evidence. Thorne, now subdued, offered a stiff apology. The victory was overwhelming. The panel concluded, Arthur had shown exceptional leadership, saving hundreds of lives. His recognition was a grievous error, intentional and motivated by racial prejudice. They apologized and recommended the immediate correction of his record, the awarding of his Distinguished Service Cross, and restoration of his rank. Even more, they offered him a position as Special Advisor on Diversity and Historical Reconciliation at Blackwood. 6 months later, Lieutenant Colonel Arthur Jenkins, medals gleaming, stood before a mirror in his new Blackwood quarters. Captain Thorne had been quietly transferred. Arthur's new office was Thorne's old one. His first initiative, reviewing historical records for other marginalized service members. His second, a mentorship program, visibility initiative, for cadets from underrepresented backgrounds. At the launch ceremony, General Kingston spoke. Then Arthur, 6 months ago, I was invisible, he began, his voice clear and strong. For 50 years, I accepted that invisibility as the price of survival. But invisibility comes at a cost, not just to those who are unseen, but to the institutions and the nation that lose the full measure of their contributions. He outlined the program's goals. Your achievements will not be invisible. Your excellence will not be denied. Your contributions will be recognized for their full value. The applause was thunderous. The Academy's new Diversity Center would bear Arthur's name. In his new office, reviewing applications, he heard a knock. A young black cadet entered, hesitantly. Lieutenant Colonel Jenkins, I just wanted to thank you. I was struggling. Then I saw your story, and I realized the quiet man who encouraged me was you. What's your name, cadet? Arthur asked. Letty N.D. July 16th, 2025, 11:04. James Cooper, sir. Arthur felt a jolt. The same name as the corporal from his unit who had sacrificed his life in Dragon Valley. Your great-uncle was a hero, Cadet Cooper, Arthur said. He gave his life, saving our entire unit. The young man nodded. That's why I came to Blackwood, sir, to honor his memory, and now, to learn from you, the officer he believed in. Arthur looked out at the academy grounds. For 50 years, he had believed his legacy denied. Now, in ways he could never have imagined, it was restored and amplified. The Invisible Man had become a beacon, illuminating a path where no service member would have to choose between identity and advancement.